How's it going, guys? Joe here. Today I'm just going to show you a very quick demonstration of working on that Rapid Moment Navigator without doing pure vibe coding. Now I'm kind of actually getting into how it's built and adding new features. Thought I might as well show that process for a change. So let's just jump right in. So I am trying to find a nice balance where I do use AI to speed up some stuff, but at the moment I'm also about the learning process, which is why I'm taking a little bit longer, because with the AI stuff, it is appealing to make things faster so you can do things faster than normal, but that is at the sacrifice of learning and potentially not knowing certain mistakes that got introduced because you don't fully know how it works under the hood. So it's a tricky balance that we gotta find these days. And at the moment, I'm leaning towards learning and then understanding how this works under the hood. So what do I got going right now? Well, right now I'm trying to make it so that I'm adding a new feature. It's basically the way it works currently is I've added a new editor tab, and this will allow me to search subtitles directly in the timeline itself, and then I can click and navigate to the timeline. And I put this in a separate window because there's a whole different mechanism involved with the API. Like, instead of just searching a subtitle file right here, this actually connects directly to the video editor API and then searches what's in the subtitle track right here. And you're not seeing the cursor, are you? My apologies. I probably should rely on the program I used to zoom in like this. I need to have that program running for the cursor to be visible, but if I forget that, then there'll be no cursor. I've done that in the past, and that's a problem. I either have to make sure it's always running, or I just forego it when I'm not using it. The problem is if I do it like this, it looks normal, but when I zoom in, you're probably seeing a double cursor now. If I get rid of my zooming program, then it'll just be one cursor. So it's a constant battle between I use the zooming program for the cursor, or I have my video capture software also do a cursor on top of that, and that's how you get that double cursor. Sometimes it's double or nothing, as the saying always goes. Anyway, so this is some sample subtitles right here, and I'm basically making it so I can search right here, but right now I'm having issues. I'll search out of here, and I kind of made this from scratch, by the way, so I can understand how this works. I pretty much did all of it from scratch without the help of AI. So the enter key does not currently work with this interface. I had to click the button, but I'll probably fix that in this video. We'll wait and see. This grabs whatever's in this drop down menu, and it does link together. Like, it still has the same underlying functionality. I linked it with the other functions when I changed the drop down, so that generally works pretty good. When I search out of here, as you can see, there's an error searching in the editor, and thanks to the help of AI, it makes it easy to add debug messages just about everywhere, because pretty much any new feature I add, I want to add a debug message so I know where things errored out, if there was an error. And with the AI autofill, which I'll be showing you in a little bit, you'll get to see that in action and how that speeds things up. So right now it looks like the functions I've created, essentially what I'm doing is, in order to do this, I did vibe code the overall idea of searching transcripts. So like right now, if I run Python find subtitle, and I guess I could zoom in as long as I have that activated, then I could search what was in there, out of here. Yeah, I'll search the word out of here for now. So out of here. And then when I look at the search results, as you can see, there's two different matches, and it tells me where the moments are located. So this has a logic for connecting to the API and searching the current subtitle track using that API, or a way to interface with the editor. And what I'm trying to do now is integrate it into the Rapid Moment Navigator. I'm manually building each piece, and essentially what I've done is I looked at the overall functions that are designed inside of here, and then I'm copying and stitching things accordingly, more or less, which is the old style way of programming before you had AI. But let's be honest, even with AI, there's still going to be a little bit of that. And if I built this functionality on top of everything else, the AI probably would have massively ran out of memory and it would keep making mistakes. So I designed it separately and then I just put it in accordingly. And then I can learn how things work. And if I know how it works, then I know where to put the puzzle pieces, if you will. So yeah, right now it looks like one of my functions errors out. So the ensure resolve edit page. I recently revamped the program so that it's easier to load the API. You might notice that recent change, and it'll make it easier to add the API to other stuff like what I'm doing here. So it kind of looks like I may have called the function wrong when I did that recently. So what line is that on? Missing one positional argument. Doesn't even tell me which line. So basically this is a manually written error, then everything after the colon is basically what the try and catch caught. So this is the error that it caught with the positional arguments. So I'm looking up searching for text, and as you can see, this is probably what ran in order for me to see this error searching for text. This is most likely where it happened. So as you can see, when I do the ensure resolve ready, if I look at the original function that now exists, and this will make it so you can declare specific functions for future editors. This is like a lookup table for the generic function name, and it's all based on which editor I've selected in this drop down. So that's a nice new feature that I added recently. Well, the AI suggested that, which is actually a pretty good suggestion, I believe. Anyways, so where's the ensure resolve ready? All based on seeing this instance of it, it looks like I forgot a self dot because it's part of object-oriented programming. I'm inside of a class. So, but it does have a self dot. And according to the other calls, we don't need a self inside of there. So if I look at the ensure resolve edit page, oh yeah, I gotta pass resolve through. That's what the issue is there. So resolve is a variable that I think I defined this out of order, so we should move that up here. Instead, let's put it up there, then we're good. I should fix that issue. Now I need to restart that program. Out of here is my search term. And it looks like we have a dictionary of the start and end range, which is good news. So it looks like we have mostly proper searching ability. Now we need to figure out how to display the results on here. So in case you need an idea on how the layout actually works for this, for example, and how we can scroll and all that stuff, I'll give you a basic rundown because it took me well over an hour to wrap my head around something that was fairly basic once you really drill it down. It just took a really long time to figure it out, and if I knew about canvases ahead of time, I wouldn't have struggled with this so much. So the show editor dialog is triggered by essentially when I go to editor and click on editor navigator, which basically this top bar is declared by this menu bar right here. And then when you do a dot menu right there and the parent is a menu bar, then it creates an actual menu that you can click on. And to make it actually appear right up here, that settings, you do the add cascade, which is what that is. This is where you add the label for settings, and then you declare the menu that it's linked to, looks like, which will pull this up. And then the add command is how you add each item in that drop down menu. And then when you declare the command, it basically triggers a function call when you click on it. So in my editor menu, when I click on Editor Navigator, it runs the show editor dialog, which is right here. What that does is it creates a top level window. I manually declared the width and height, which might not be the best way to do it. I might want to do it based on the screen size and some percentage or something. Creates a top level window with the root, aka this main window, being the parent. Title of that window is Editor Navigator. I declare the width and height, and then this is the X and Y offset so that it's always centered based on the main window. And then I created an object-oriented self dot for the main frame of this editor dialog right here. So it creates a frame on top of this dialog, which I can put stuff in. Think of it like a div if you know about HTML. I added some padding so that there's a bit of a border on the outside. Generally makes it look nice. So within this main frame, then I created a search frame, which is where I believe all this stuff goes here. I'm filling it horizontally so everything goes fully from left to right. And then this search bar is a string variable, which is essentially a variable intended to be passed around with Kinter. I create an entry box, pretty much mimic the settings of what this was. The dot pack is what actually puts it inside the frame that we created above. Find button, the parent is in that search frame also. Same with that entry box. Says the word find. And when I click the find button, it'll trigger that find text right there. Added to the left side, which will stack after this search bar. Combo box is what the drop down is. This editor variable, I believe since the editor variable is what's on the primary screen, I think I just set it to what it is on the main program so that this mimics that. Probably not the best way to do it, but it makes it easier. Put that next to the find. That's why you say side equals left. Otherwise it would be on the very right side if you say right instead. So the actual item to select in the drop down will be whatever's in the preferences. I'm basically mimicking the main program's behavior. But in order to get the values on the list, I'm actually just stealing it from the main program right here. Whatever on that list, I copy that to this list. That way if I change this one, this will just pick up whatever that is. And then of course if the editor changes, this is what'll make it so that this onEditorChange function triggers anytime the drop-down changes. So then there's a frame for all the results. That's its own frame. So all this stuff that you see on the top row, if you will, that's inside the search frame. Then this is inside essentially a results frame, because any result related thing goes down here. This is a label frame so that I can say the word search result there, which makes it look kind of fancy. I fill it both horizontally and vertically because any other search result thing will go into this master search result frame. Then I create a canvas, which that's purely for the purpose of scrolling. The canvas's only purpose is to scroll. Otherwise, I wouldn't even need a canvas. So think of a canvas kind of like a paint canvas. I put everything on top of there, and then if I slide the page with everything on it, everything just slides along with the movement of the page, right? So the canvas really makes it easier to scroll. Frames don't inherently allow you to link itself with a scroll bar, so canvas is used for that. So I have the main frame for the results, which has a label on it. Then I put a canvas inside of it. Then I put a scroll bar inside that same frame. So we got a canvas in the frame, then a scroll bar. right next to it, which is inside that same frame. Then I pack both of those, and then this is how I initially link the canvas to the scroll bar. Then I create a frame inside the canvas, which is where the actual results will go, since the canvas's only purpose is scrolling. And any result does not go into the canvas, it goes into the frame, which goes into the canvas. And then a canvas itself doesn't actually have frames, it has windows instead, which is basically a frame more or less. So I put a frame inside the canvas, and then I put a window inside the canvas as well, which is basically the frame right there. So right here I've just declared a frame, which doesn't really put it in the canvas until I do this. And then this will make it so that anytime, so this frame, that it's kind of confusing how I have a frame with that label on it, a canvas inside of there, and then another frame inside that canvas. Well, the actual results will go on that frame inside the canvas, which is results container. So results frame is the outer one. The frame that's inside the canvas is results container. Make sure you don't get those two mixed up, because otherwise you'll troubleshoot for hours only to realize it's because things were going in the canvas instead of that inner frame. In that inner frame, aka the container, that's where the results go, all of them. So what this does is anytime something gets added to that frame, the dimension of that frame changes, and then that triggers this function automatically because we've created a bind. And what this function does is it basically increases the bounding box of the canvas so that the canvas's height changes accordingly to the results in there. So this bounding box, essentially it figures out how big all the results are, if you will. So in this case, as you can see, we can scroll up and down right here because the size of everything with the results in it is bigger than what's visible on the screen itself. So the bounding boxes from here, we don't even see the bottom of the bounding box until we scroll to the very bottom to here. That's the height of the canvas, which we can't see all at once, as indicated by my scrolling here. So the bounding box figures out the dimensions of all the results in there, and then this will actually resize the canvas accordingly and set the width based on the result passed through. And then this will link the scroll wheel to that canvas. And because this says bind all, that's why there's currently a bug where if I scroll inside the show here, which there's no scroll bar right now, but if I did, it'll scroll on the results as well as the show drop down. So to get rid of that, I would probably not use a bind all anywhere and do a separate bind for each place that it's used. The bind all basically allows anything to be in focus for the scroll wheel to apply to this, which is not applying for some reason, but it'll make the scroll wheel apply to this even if a drop down's in focus. The bind all is kind of like a catch-all for the scroll wheel. No matter where you're in focus, no matter which widget's focused, basically this will still scroll. If you don't want that, then just do the regular bind. Then it'll only apply when it's explicitly in focus. And of course, the crucial detail is when we do the bounding box for the canvas, those two are the same from within the results container. Then in the results canvas, we're configuring the window inside of the canvas rather than the canvas itself. So it's linked to the container, which is a frame inside the canvas rather than the canvas itself. That was a mistake I had. Anyway, I'm getting caught up in the details. Let's focus on actually troubleshooting this. So if I search out of here, what happens right now? We get results, but we need to propagate it on the screen. So now that we have our actual matches, this matches is basically a dictionary. So I think if we just wanted to purely print the text, we can print the text key. If I'm not mistaken, I think we could technically create a loop for each and every match. You can print the match. As you can see, AI did some autofilling right there. But we could do index text, and then it'll just list all the text matches that we get. So if I restart the program, search out of here, then it shows our 2 text matches. So we have all the data from the match variable. So let's put that back to print matches just so we know. So how do we actually add results to this? Well, it's all based on how the original program works. So this is how the main interface is actually built. Same sort of logic as we went over before. No status bar on the one we just created for this or anything. So here's a logic for how our actual buttons get created. So the update results UI is where everything actually gets updated. So the file header is basically the green text that we see on the screen. There is a interesting glitch that seems to happen every once in a while where it doesn't actually search. I gotta look into that. It might be because I've opened this up and then closed it. There might be some overlap interference, but restarting the program usually fixes that. So I search out of here. That green text that says file, that's the file header right here. And there's a frame specifically for that header so that everything else is below that, including these import buttons. That makes it so the import buttons aren't up here. They're a little bit lower than this. So there's a frame specifically for that. There's a header frame, and then the actual label, the green text, is all defined right here. And this update UI shows or triggers for every single, all these rows of green text. It's a separate instance of the update results UI because the subtitle files are all iterated over, and the update results UI is triggered for each of those iterations. And then within those iterations, there's another loop inside the results UI where all the results from a single episode happen. So right here, this is a file header. There's only one result for that header. But as you can see down here, this header has 3 results. So there's a array that gets passed through this update UI right there, this file results. All 3 of those results here are contained inside that array. And then this is the loop inside the update results UI where that happens. So for each of those results, it'll create a frame for each individual result, which all goes into that results container inside the canvas, which is inside the overall results frame. Remember, results container is in the canvas, results frame is outside the canvas, canvas is in the results frame, and the results container is inside that results canvas, 3 layers down basically. So the individual result is inside that results container, inside the canvas, inside the frame. Then the import buttons essentially become their own frame so that they're aligned to the right while everything here is aligned to the left. So those import buttons are inside their own frame. Yeah, this clickable import is basically, since an import button is basically a hyperlink, it's basically a label but with a little bit of additional functionality decorated on top of it. As you can see, this is a class where the parent is the label class from Kinter. And this is a manually defined class which calls the parent inside of it, but it's treated as a hyperlink, hence why the cursor changes, for example. And all it really does is when the button is clicked, or when the label's clicked I should say, it calls the callback function, which is in this case handle import clip. So when a clip is imported, this is what runs. Define the information above, and then down here run the actual import function based on the time codes previously calculated. The result is basically all the information about the result itself, with the dictionary of the start time, the end time, the actual subtitled text for that particular result within that range, all that stuff. And of course, since there's a tooltip for the import buttons, it makes sense that that would also be part of the class. So that's why it makes sense to abstract the import buttons, because at their core they do the same thing. They trigger a function when you click on it. They have a tooltip text, so it makes sense to define that in its own individual class, which basically just extends the label class. Then of course the actual content is what's underneath it. So based on this knowledge, we're not going to have it quite so advanced. We're instead going to just simply list probably the time code, similar to how we do it here, and the result. That's really all we need. But since, oh yeah, we are going to click on it actually. I just want to check. This is a function that triggers when we click on a specific time code. I want to make sure it's not too specific to, unfortunately, because of how this is programmed, it is hard-coded to Open Media Player Classic. So that is going to have to be abstracted as well at a later point, so that I can open it in another media player, or in this case, it just simply jumps to the moment. So I might create a function called editor timecode click, or rather resolve timecode click. So on this registry that's toward the top, this editor registry, editor timecode click will be resolve timecode click. And I'm just going to create the resolve specific function for now. Later on, I'll link it to the generic function because I don't really know how that works off the top of my head, because I want to future-proof this for future editor supports. So why is this all relevant? Well, if you notice, it goes through each result, creates a result frame, which we are going to want to do. This will go inside of a canvas, which I believe we declared above. But given that a result will have a time code and the text underneath it, it makes sense to create a frame for each of those results. And then inside those results, we can create a label for each one of them, which will be clickable. But the good news is it is generic enough, it looks like, that we will be able to use clickable time code in this program as well, which again is basically a hyperlinked label designed to do a callback function. And no, there's no tooltip, but if I wanted that, I could easily add it to this. So since we have a results container, that'll be the parent of the individual result we create. So if we get down this far, that means we've got some results. So then we display them. So this is where we'll create a result frame, and that does go in the editor results container, which is in the canvas. And this automatically autofilled to where it creates a label, but again, we want this to actually be clickable time code. Oh, I think we're going to want to iterate through this, aren't we? Because we're creating a frame for each one of them. So how do we know? Yeah, create a frame for each match. For each of those matches, we'll indent that. That's where the AI autofill is pretty beneficial. Create a frame for it, add it to the horizontal side since it'll fill out the whole thing for now. So clickable timecode, what does that take in? The parent, the timecode, result, callback. Parent is result frame. Parent, the timecode, which would be the text. The timecode text, I think we'll define right here. That should be the correct parameters, although a 265 to 283 is the frame number. If I'm fine with that instead of the standard format, that could work. Looks like I didn't do the hour, minute, second, millisecond format. I could do that later, I guess, if I really wanted, but I'm not going to do that now. The time code will be that text, which will just show the like 265 to 283. That's what's going to be displayed. So it's the time code. I might be using it wrong. So there's a result and then there's a callback. The callback will be whatever. I'm just giving it, I'll just define it right here. So the actual logic for navigating to the time code will be based on that jump to frame. So I'm going to steal that function. Let's add the helper function for getting the timeline frame rate too. So I'll grab that, indent it properly, as this thing suggesting. Nope, it deleted it, which it epically failed on. So at this point, this is what I'm gonna get the frame rate, because it's all based on the time code numbers, the start and end. We're basically jumping to the start. So clickable time code does not have the frame rate, so I don't know why it thinks that's a keyword argument. It's not. Looks like I have a format timecode function, so the next logical step is to bring this over. And the FPS seems to only be to convert it to timecode for visual representation. So I'll put the format timecode. So that'll be the frames and the frame rate, and then I'll just have it. I have the rest of the program fall back to 24 if it's not defined. So I just do that. So then where I display the format, it looks like it's autofilling how to format it, which is pretty cool. That should make it display the frame rate correctly on the hyperlink. Actually, the point of this was the get resolve timeline FPS. Oh wait, we did declare that above. So let's just make it how it was. There was a method to my madness. Get the frame rate, display that for each and every one, so we're not recalculating it. We're just referencing what it's calculated to right here from memory. I'm gonna move the jump to frame function up a little higher just so it's easier for me to access. Add the self reference, which I apparently forgot. Well, actually I copied and pasted it, so I was just gonna adapt accordingly. We shouldn't have to redo all this logic. So I'll just indent that over. Get rid of this inert exception. Those functions were not correct, so this will correct our reference to it. I don't know if I want to put anything here for right now, because that jump to frame might give us what we need. So up here, let's call jump to frame instead, which might not be correct. I doubt that our variables are actually going to pass through correctly. Also, I don't think this is a ttk dot clickable timecode. It's self dot, I think. No, I think it might actually just be clickable timecode. There's likely no way that this is going to work. So to get out of here, result would be match, I believe. The result variable should be our match text, or our match variable. I don't know which positional argument it is, so I'll just do a keyword argument so I don't have to worry about the order. But if I put match there, then it should get the variable as needed. Formatting is the same, I'm not really sure. kind of hoping for the best, which is not a good way to think. Ah, look at that. So those are the 2 time codes. Perfect. Okay, so in theory, I want to replace the subtitles with an entire episode. Here's the homicide episode. So we got a bunch of subtitles now. In theory, the word homicide should trigger more results than what we can see, so hopefully the canvas worked correctly. So if I search homicide, that took a little longer than I expected, but it's possible the API was initializing. So we got all of our results shown here. Any chance it jumps right to the moment? Nope. So we'll have to debug why that's not working. Let's add the text to it now. So that should be fairly straightforward. So the text should be able to go in result frame. This is not result label. Timecode text was already. I'll do timecode label for now. How about this? Gets renamed timecode string. And then I can do timecode text, which should be the actual label. Or I don't even know, subtitle text equals that corresponding text, I think is all I have to do, right? Yeah, it'll be a label, but I think instead of, I'll just put it right there, match text, and then go like that maybe. And then we'll pack it right underneath in theory too. That should put the text where it belongs. Homicide, let's see if that works. The slower results are gonna be from the API search versus searching subtitle files. The API is slower. So one thing I would probably fix is have this on 2 lines. There's a mechanism for that. I think it might be this wrap link that we got right here. So we can just try that once. Just put the wrap link right there. That might match what it was before, I don't know. No, did not put it on the double line. No, I'm not gonna make a big deal for right now. If I wasn't really after the learning experience, I could just have the AI agent figure this out. They probably will by selectively doing syntax from a context window perspective. And it'll probably do just fine with that. But let's real quickly figure out why it's not clicking correctly with the debug mode. So homicide, I think the slow length or the slow speed is probably from an API loading. So this will work well enough even if I didn't indent it, but I will fix it off camera because that's not the point right now. So jump to frame. Oh, so I guess this other function, since it requires an argument, I'm gonna put this here and have that act as a wrapper function instead of doing the jump to frame. So it needs a timeline and a frame. I'm making it a little bit difficult because, well, some of my variables are not global, and passing through variables can be kind of tricky when you're doing a callback like this. So this is a terrible thing I've done here. Self.jump to frame. See, there's self.items, which makes me think it'll be easier to maintain persistent state that way. If I did end up doing a self dot, would it detect everywhere I need it? Probably not. I could try. Might be a terrible idea though. Maybe I won't need it everywhere. Get rid of that pass. And then where I previously defined the result, I'm just gonna see if that gives me a quick fix. I might end up having AI refine this. Who knows? Oh, and this result equals match. Pretty sure that's supposed to be matches. Oh, no, we're iterating. We're good. So the next argument is the frame that we're jumping to. Do I really want to make that state specific? I'm thinking maybe I should create another class for clickable resolve timecode maybe. And then I pass through the start or maybe frame. And then the callback will have frame inside that. That would probably be a better system. And then over here, then we could probably put jump to frame, because now the arguments will go through correctly. Jumps to frame. So with that callback, these are the two arguments that go in. Oh, and because frame is missing from there, it needs to get added over there. And result is match, then frame is a frame number. Okay, so jump to frame. So result and frame from here, what's going in as the arguments. And jump to frame takes in a timeline, which did I make that self dot? So let's do a substitution with, do we have a timeline? Yeah, let's get rid of the dot. So I'll put a parenthesis right after the self dot so that I can easily substitute it with timeline itself, but frame is not actually timeline. So what arguments do we really need? Since timeline isn't a self dot, we will need that. We're not going to need the individual match because we're just going to pass through the start variable. So in a way, the first argument will be the frame number, because that's what the result keyword argument is. And result is mapped as a first argument inside of clickable resolve timecode. So I want to make this, so timecode, we're setting it to the frame number. And result in this case will be that start index. So I think we'll switch them around and then pass a timeline through here. So result is equal to match index, not item, whatever the start is called, just start, match index start. So that'll become the frame number. And then the timeline is the second argument, I think. So result is that first one. Maybe I'll just call it frame. So now we gotta change the keyword argument to frame. Then I'll just do timeline, I guess. Not a terrible thing, because inside the function I might have to rearrange some stuff. I'll just do self.result on the outside. So then back up here, hopefully it's not backwards anymore. Somehow result is timeline. And then frame equals match index starts. What a terrible thing I've done with inconsistent naming. There's like 5 different places I define it, and I'm just doing what's easiest right now. I'll have AI refine it, but let's test it once. Let's see if it fixes our issue. So homicide, that took a little longer than usual, which is slightly strange. So let's see if it can jump to the time code. Yep, 447, it jumped right to it. If I want to go to the A52 one, boom, found it. So now it's a Rapid Moment Navigator inside of Resolve too. Let's real quickly figure out how I would hit enter in this search box, and then I'm gonna have AI refactor certain things in that area. I know which areas I need to look at, so getting the AI to do that should be pretty easy. And then any refinement it makes, I'm gonna look at it and make sure it's what I would do myself, because I'm really just using the AI to save time, or else I could do it myself. It doesn't matter. And of course, this should work by itself. Oh, what the heck? I closed this out and it was, the search actually worked. Remember earlier when it didn't? I'll look into that later. Okay, so that works. Okay, let's figure out how to hit enter on that entry box real quick. Otherwise, we got the basic logic. So now when I'm trying to listen to audio on my phone, and then I want to find the corresponding moment in my timeline, which, by the way, the time code on my phone, if it's a moment at like 6:14. So just to give you an example, I unfortunately don't have my phone display working right now, but I have some bookmarks right here. I bookmark time codes that I'm going to edit later on with the same media right here. But if I go to this 2952, which is where my first bookmark is, that's not the same time code as what I have on this editor. So then what? Well, if I just search the words, then I can find it a lot quicker, because I used to have to go to a subtitle file, match the words of this to the actual timecode on here, and then I manually go to the timecode in the video editor, because it's all based on the transcript. So in this case, here's the transcript that we're looking at. So let's say my first bookmark is 2952. Well, I search for the time code, like guy who owns, let's say that's what I said on my phone. Owns homicide, doing an example. Well, 2952 is actually 447 in my timeline, so then I manually go to 447, when in reality I could just go to here, owns homicide, which is ultimately the same transcript. Now I can go to here much faster. So I could just listen to what's being said in my bookmark, type in keywords, then I don't have to worry about translating the time code from my phone to this. That is going to be handy. The amount of work it took to get there though, I'm not going to be able to repay that debt that I lost from doing this process much more off camera than what you see in here, but you get the idea. You could imagine, like, if I actually utilize AI more, I could have got this done a lot faster, but I wanted to know how my actual program works underneath the hood, and what I showed is just some of it. I now have a much better idea on how it works under the hood, so even if I have AI help me, I know how the program works, that I know generally what areas it needs to touch to get the job done for whatever I need to change. And then also I identified some bad practices since I went through the code, which I didn't even know about until I looked at the code. Now I've seen some of that. I was able to get it worked out. Now it's easier to access the API, which you just saw me implement here, I believe, or at least some of it. So now that's improved. It's a lot better now. So yeah, this is cool. This is going to save a lot of time for navigating in a video editor too. And I would obviously do better practices to make the functions generic so that you can select a different editor and then do that corresponding API's code if that supports subtitles too. Then that way it's future proof with all sorts of editors besides Resolve. I only use Resolve, so that's why that's all that's there right now. But if you want your own editor, this would be a good opportunity to contribute to open source software. By all means do that and create a pull request, and then we'll see if we can get that in there and working. I won't be able to test it myself, but as long as it doesn't break this functionality as a result, then I will be able to accept the pull request from you. So yeah, I'm gonna have AI do some refactoring and then it should be good to go. So that's all I wanted to show. So if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to let me know. I'll try to get to you as soon as possible. Otherwise, yeah, I think that's it. So thanks for watching and have a good one. Peace.